Saludos everybody, welcome back to Decentshirt, where we play cards while we wear decent shirts. And for today's video, you could say that we have something juicy. That's right, if you haven't found out already, today's video is going to be a continuation of the set review of the newest set of ELESTRALS Frostfall. And in today's video, we're going to be working with our second part of the 5 different videos that I'm going to be making on all of the cards of Frostfall. So, if you haven't caught up already, if you haven't seen the first video, I'm going to give you the link down below so you guys can catch up. And if you've already are up to speed with my set review, then let's get right to it. Today, we're going to be focusing on the 2 elements of fire and water. The perfect elements to boil down an excellent and new strategy. So, let's see what Frostfall has been cooking up. And for those that missed out on the last video, we have here a summary of all the goodies that we reviewed on the last video, especially focused on the frost mechanics and all of the frost ELESTRALs. But moving to the grade score. So if this is your first time, I'm gonna give you guys a brief intro. We have S for the best of the best, meaning the best cards that will see play everywhere. We have A for the meta contenders, so there are cards that will see play, but you can probably see that they're going to be limited in use or in limited index. And then we have B for will see play sometimes, which it's basically, as the title implies, we'll see some play, but it will be limited. C for rogue play and any kind of deck that is kind of fun or cards that will be fun to use. We have D for lost in the sauce, for those that are living and daydreaming in cards that will probably see very limited play. And we have F as in the worst grade that you could get, because there are practically cards that are unusable. Now, that would be all for the grades. Let's get on to the video. Alright, and our first card is none other than Smokey. If you don't know what Smokey does, Smokey is a 1 cost, 3 attack, and 2 defense, so nothing special in terms of the stats. But it does say that when you special cast this Smokey, you can draw 2 cards. And on a glance, right, on first glance, this might seem like a really cool idea, a cool effect, because it gives you vibes of Jartaya and other cards that let you draw. However, when you really read right between the lines and you realize that it's special cast, you realize that there's not many ways you can special cast in the game currently. Not even with some of the cards that we're going to be reading today are you going to notice that we have a lot of options that will let you want to special cast Smokey over other cards to just draw 2 cards. So due to that, I think that we're going to have to limit Smokey to probably a D. I think that in the future this card could be really busted. However, right now, based on the meta and the cards that we're going to be revealing and that we've already have in the first edition, I don't think it's going to go very far. But this card is often going to be paired with this card, which is the Ascension of Smokey, known as Caprifume. Caprifume is a 2 cost fire ELESTRAL that has 5 attack and 4 defense. Wouldn't be the worst, but still for 2 costs it feels like it's a little bit on the lower side. Let's see if its effect can make up for it though. Its effect says that this Caprifume gets +2 attack for each fire ELESTRAL on the field. Alright, so instead of 5, it really is a 7 attack, which is excellent. That's pretty decent for a 2-drop, right? It's on the same level as something like a Sonic Core, so that already giving good vibes. But this is not the end of the effect. We also say that it has another effect. It says you can expend 1 fire in order to special cast on 1 fire spirit ELESTRAL from your hand. So this card is really good at swarming your board, right? It allows you to once per turn special cast other Fire Elestrals, which in theory is really strong, right? Especially because we already saw before that Smoky lets you draw when it's special casted. So the idea that the creators of this game had when they created Crab Perfume and Smoky is probably to be using them in tandem. However, I'm sure that there are other Elestrals that are going to be more viable or at least more enticing for you to special cast. The key thing about Crab Perfume, however, is the fact that it has to be from your hand, not from your deck. So that means that you have to have it in your hand when you want to use this effect. So that kind of limits how far Crab Perfume can really get. However, again, it's a card that shows to have a little bit of promise, and I think it's going to be the main card out of a couple of rogue decks that are going to want to try to use Crab Perfume and abuse it. And who knows, maybe you can create a deck that can abuse Crab Perfume, if maybe you use it as a defensive option, as a wall, instead as an offensive option, so that way you can cast out many Elestrals in the same turn. So again, I see potential for this card. I just think that it's not going to be the most consistent card, so I don't think it's going to see a lot of play. I think it will be relegated to a rogue deck. So I'm going to give this card a C. Right, let's move on. After Crab Perfume, we then have Kamagma, and I think that this one is actually one of the more exciting cards of the Fire Elestrals. Kamagma, if you haven't known, it's a 1-cost fire and also has 4 attack and 2 defense. So that's pretty decent for a 1-drop. Not the greatest, but still pretty decent. 4 is pretty respectable. But it doesn't end there. Its effect says that when Kamagma receives 1 or more fire spirits, you can draw a card and then discard a card. And again, this card gives you the vibes of something like Clovey or even Drataya. Fire was really missing ways to draw and to add consistency to it. So cards like Smoky and Kamagma are welcome, right, to any Fire Celestial player. However, I think that one of the better things about this is not even the idea that you can draw. It's the fact that it's a receive effect. And Fire was really missing that abusable Fire receiver, because the only one that we had was another Celestial that is, I believe it was Humble Bus or something like that, that would let you mill your opponents when it received its effect. So that was very centric to a mill strategy, which Fire is a lot of things, but it's not concentrating on one specific strategy. And I think Kamagma makes it so that you can use it in more general terms. And a 4 attack is, again, very decent. So you can use it not only to draw, but also to exert offensive pressure. So I think this card deserves a B. I think that is a card that is going to be seen in any Fire deck. Any card that uses Fire is probably going to run maybe 1 or 2. Because I think that it does have benefits to be able to draw and then discard a card, right? Right now we're seeing in Frostfall that there are a lot of decks that are going to want to interact with the underworld. So the fact that you can discard cards makes it so that you set up while also not losing anything because you get to draw. So again, I think that it's going to be a good card. I think it deserves to be, and we're going to move on to our next card. Okay, so after Kamagma, we have another card that I think is going to excite a lot of people, and that is Exalt Flare. Exalt Flare is our newest Nexus for Fire, and it has 1 cost, 1 fire, and 3 attack and 2 defense. Again, the stats, nothing to write home about. However, its effect, like I said before, it's a Nexus ability. So it says you can Nexus up to 2 fire, and when you do, you can special ascend this Exalt Flare to an Celestial with an enchantment cost of 1 fire or 2 fire from your hand. So again, it's another Nexus, which we all see that Nexus abilities tend to be really broken. And while I wouldn't say that Exalt Flare's ability is broken right now, I do think that its effect has the potential to really break the game further on when we have more Celestials. However, I do still think that right now it's still a pretty viable card. It is able to basically special ascend or cast Elestrals that you would normally not be able to special ascend to or cast in the first turn. So for example, this can be used in a Waspire deck, which is what most people think of when they think of fire, right? Exulfer is able to, if you were able to use Hephaestus and Exulfer, you would be able to nexus some spirits to it, and then you would be able to enchant to special ascend into the Waspire, which would then be able to burn your opponent for a while, for a lot, I would say. So again, we see that there is some sort of synergy with fire decks that like to have a lot of spirits on board. But not only that, we also have access to the Blazerus, right? Blazerus. So you could, in theory, ascend into Blazerus, and Blazerus has the effect that it can attack 2 times in a turn. So in theory, you can ascend into Blazerus on your first turn. And not only that, but you're also able to, in theory, boost your Blazerus offensive power because you're able to pack many spirits onto the Blazerus. In theory, you could even end up with like 4 to 5 spirits on the Blazerus, which could attack 2 times. And if you're able to attack even once directly, that means that you're losing 5 lives out of that one Blazerus. So again, I think that there's a lot of potential with this card. I think that this card is going to see some play, and I think that it's going to be relegated, at least for now, to an A. I think it will see play. I think it will see play in meta decks. However, I'm not sure which meta deck that is going to be right now, but I do still think that it will see play. So this card deserves an A for the A tier. Alright, moving on to the last of the fire spirit Elestrals of this set. We have Lavalith. And Lavalith, right from the get-go, I'm going to tell you, because even the creator of this game said it himself, I think that this is the best card of the whole set. Yeah, I'm not going to hold any punches. Lavalith is probably the best card in this game, in this set, not game, set. And I think that if you're planning to go competitive in this game, you're probably going to want to have a playset of Lavalith. And let me tell you why. So first, we have a 2-cost fire, which in theory and from the glance would be really bad, because again, fire is considered the weakest type, and also because it's a 2-cost and not many 2-costs are played currently in the game. It has 6 attack and 4 defense, which again by itself doesn't seem like anything all that extraordinary. However, when we get to its effect, that's where this really goes off, right? Lavalith can be normal cast with 2 fire if an opponent has at least 2 more enchanting spirits than you do. Alright, so Lavalith is basically a comeback card, or a card that is able to punish your opponent for overextending. Lavalith says that if your opponent has 2 or more enchanting spirits, much like resting on your laurels, right, that also can only be activated if your opponent has 2 or more enchanting spirits over yours. Well, the same applies to Lavalith, and that means that you can normal cast Lavalith on your first turn in theory, as long as your opponent has more than 2 more spirits than you. And that's pretty strong, right? It's great for Ascension. It's great to pack pressure. It's a 6 attacker, so that means that you can run over most 1-drops. So you can beat over Astravit in defense. So that's a great. Now that changes a lot the way that we see this card, but it doesn't end there. It also has a second effect, which is what really takes this card over the top, which is that when you cast Lavalith, you can target and destroy a rune. That means that anytime that you cast Lavalith, as long as it's properly enchanted, you can automatically destroy a rune of your opponent. It can be face up, it can be set, it doesn't matter, you can destroy a rune. That is amazing. That is really strong. We've already talked about in the past with cards like Equalings, Pegas, and even the Indus form of Morphos about how strong destroying back row is in this game, because there's an over centralization of counter runes. So the fact that you're able to destroy a counter rune when you throw it means that you're going to, in theory, have at the very least a 2-for-1, because they're going to be forced to activate the rune if they're allowed to use it in your turn, right? If they're going to have to expend, or they're just going to have to lose their counter rune, which means that you're going to be able to attack and force them to use another counter rune if they have it. So again, a really good card. I think this card is going to see a lot of play, even in decks that don't run fire or that don't have fire as their main focus. And with another rune that we're going to discuss later on in the different reviews that I make, we're going to see that this, in tandem with another rune, is going to push us to really consider using fire spirits in our decks, even when they're not the main strategy. So again, this is the best card in the set. I think that there is no doubt about what grade I'm gonna give it. This deserves an S. Best of the best. It's up there with the rest of the top decks and the top cards in the first set and the second set. It's arguably even better than most of the cards of the first set. So for that reason, definitely an S. Let's move on to our water portion. And right off the get-go, we have Dratagua. Dratagua is a really exciting card because it is one of the new cards that is going to be using an effect that is first introduced in this set, which is the receive effect to heal. We already discussed in the first video Cataract, which when it receives a Frost Spirit, it is able to heal 2. Well, the same applies to Dratagua. Dratagua, even though it has 1 attack and 4 defense, it is able to heal, or basically return up to 2 water spirits from your underworld to your spirit deck when it receives a water spirit. So this is another great bait for water nexusing, which in water archetypes we already have a really good amount and really good use of nexusing, because we have things as in the Ampharos, which lets you draw when you move around with Nexus, and we also even have our Divine Rune Poseidon, which also allows you to Nexus right from it to another Celestial. So that means that in theory you could, if you had Poseidon and Dratagua, and if you wanted to, you could even heal 2 times in the same turn very easily with just having Dratagua and Poseidon. That alone makes this card have a lot of potential. It is also going to be paired off with another card that I think that is going to see play. I think it's going to be its own rogue deck, and we're going to see very soon. I think that this card is a really solid card, even if it's not used in the main way that the creators wanted to. It's going to be very solid in any water deck. It's possibly even going to substitute the Sluggle, which hurts me a little bit because Sluggle is my favorite card. Obviously, it's what started this channel, but at the same time, it's too good not to pass out on it. So I think that this card receives an A, because it's going to be more versatile than its counterpart, and I think it's going to see play. I think that just because of this card, water decks are going to be a lot more viable. So A. Let's move on to its Ascension, which is Lockagon. Lockagon is a new water celestial that is 2 costs. It has 2 attack, which already starts to seem a little bit, well, not a little bit, very underwhelming, and 6 defense. However, let's see its effect. It says that Lockagon gets +1 attack for each water in your underworld. Okay, so for each water spirit in your underworld, you're going to get +1. Alright, that starts to become a little bit more doable, right? In theory, if you have 4 water spirits in your underworld, you're going to have a 6/6, which is not the worst thing in the world, right? You can try to use it as a wall while you are able to rack up those spirits in the underworld. However, we do have a second effect, and the second effect says that when you return 1 or more water spirits from your underworld to your spirit deck, you can target and destroy a card. Now, this is both good and bad, because this really makes you think about whether you really want to rack up spirits in your underworld because when you heal, you get an awesome effect as in targeting and destroying, which is obviously really strong in this game. It's not even limited to Elestrals or runes, it's either, right? It can destroy any card on the field. However, basing ourselves that you're kind of going against what you want because you want to have water spirits in your underworld so you can have enough attack to really become an offensive presence, while you also want to abuse to heal. You do see that there is some conflicting ideas in this card. That being said, we do have the amazing support of Dratagua, which we already discussed, and it's really going to make it so that Lakagon, in theory, could use this effect 2 or 3 times in the same turn, right? With something like Poseidon, if you're able to cast 1 or 2 Poseidons and then, or an Ambrosia, again, anytime that you recover a water spirit from your underworld, this card is going to be able to pop off. So while you're not going to be able to pack a lot of offensive pressure in terms of attacking, you are going to be able to destroy many cards in theory. So again, this card has a lot of potential. I think it's going to be a pretty solid deck in the meta. I think that a lot of people are going to want to use it. So I'm going to give it a B. I think that it deserves at the very least a B. I think that it's going to have all the support that it needs. But it's a matter of, is it going to be able to fend off all these strong attackers that can probably run over the 6 defense. Alright, so let's move on to our next card. We have Cerebral. Cerebral was one of the cards that was revealed kind of early to us. It has 2 attack, 2 defense, 1 water cost, and it says that when you cast this Cerebral, an opponent must reveal each face down card on their field. So your opponent has to reveal all of their counter runes, which information is key. It's very important in this type of game to be able to know what your opponent is packing. It's one of the reasons why Spark It is one of the best cards right now in the format, because you're able to not only discard one of the most problematic cards that your opponent might have in the turn, but you're also able to grab a hand advantage, right? You're able to know what your opponent has, so you as a good player could come up with a strategy that can go around what they have, right? And also you're able to plan for future turns. In turn, your opponent doesn't know what your hand has, so again, you're working with an advantage there. So in that sense, even though you're not looking at the hand, you are still looking at the face down, so you know which cards your opponent has and how it's best to react to it. And Cerebral could even be able to make your opponent forced to use the Gorgons in some very extreme cases, right? Maybe not now, but in the future, I think that most opponents are not going to want to reveal what are the counter runes that they have cast. So that is in itself pretty good. But we also see that it has a second effect that says that it destroys each non-counter rune revealed this way. So not only are you revealing all of the counter or all of the set runes that your opponent has, but you're also able to destroy all of the bluffs, all of the cards that were not counter rune that you did not have to set. It is a really punishing card, and I think that it will see play as a tech card for those counter rune heavy decks. So I think that on that alone, I think it deserves a C. I'm going to give this card a C just because it will be a tech that I can see being played in a couple of decks, especially decks that already run Tsunami. It's not that hard to add Cerebrals for those very counter rune heavy decks. Alright, moving on to its ascension, we have Cerebrum. Cerebrum is a 2-cost water that has 2 attack and 4 defense. That we're already starting on the left foot with this card. Bad stats. Let's see what its effect does. The Cerebrum gets +1 defense for each face down card in your rune. I'm not loving that effect, right? It really depends on your opponent, and when you have cards that depend on your opponent, that means that your opponent, a good player, right, a good opponent, will probably be able to play around it. So right from the get-go, that first effect doesn't really make me all that thrilled to play this card. It does say that while this Cerebrum is in defense position, your opponent cannot set cards. And now that's a very, very strong effect. I think that it does make this card a little bit more viable. But I don't know if anyone is really going to try to build a deck around Cerebrum, and this card really feels like you would have to build a deck around it to really put out its maximum potential. But it depends on your opponent setting their cards, and if they don't draw the set cards, you don't really have that big of a defense stat to really make it so that your opponent has to set their cards. So I don't know. I feel like Cerebrum is not really that good. It's probably one of the worst cards that we've reviewed so far in this set, and I think I'm gonna give this an F. I don't think it really is going to see any play at all. Not even in like limited formats or casual formats. So I think it deserves an F. All right, let's go with Narpoon. Narpoon is a card that many players are very excited to get their hands off because, first off, it has 4 attack, which again we already said that it's pretty decent. 3 defense, again pretty decent for a 4 cost, for a 4 attacker. Normally 4 attackers usually have 1 or 2 defense, so this is pretty decent. And on a 1-drop, water. But the main reason why people are excited is because of its effect, which is that when you normal cast this Narpoon, you can search your deck for 1 Spirit Frost Celestial and add it to your hand. That's amazing. This is a searcher. This basically makes it so that Frost is even more consistent now because you're able to search for that one-off card that you're looking for. This card is a card that enables more Frost to be even more consistent, and it is also able to set up any Frost deck that would like to play it. And even though it's not a Frost Celestial, right, which would be the ideal thing, the fact is that Narpoon is probably going to still see play in any Frost deck because most people are going to run Tsunami. You already run 2 or 3 spirits or water spirits if you're not a centric or water centric deck. You're probably going to run 2 to 3 water spirits for Tsunami. And this just gives it so that you can still use it. You don't have to commit all that many water spirits, and you can still take advantage of Narpoon. So again, I think this card is really good. I think that it will see play in many decks, and it's one of the most straightforward S tiers that we have. It definitely deserves the S. Alright, how about its Ascension counterpart, Wall Lens? Okay, so Wall Lens is a water and frost spirit, so it's dual typing. It has 8 attack for a 2 cost. That's really decent. I would say that's really good because it is able to get rid of things such as Lakagon or even your Sonic Horse, right? It has 4 defense, which is again pretty solid, so it's pretty bulky. I gotta say, it's pretty bulky in terms of the stats. That's pretty good. Let's see its effect. When this Wall Lens destroys an opponent's Celestial in battle, you can search that player's deck for any number of cards of the same name as that Celestial and send them to their underworld. Alright, so this card, in terms of stats, is really good. In terms of its effect, it's interesting. It's a card that is able to go harder on people, right? It says that you can basically mill or it just says destroy any other copy of an Celestial that you destroy with Wall Lens. So something like a Viserys, if you're able to destroy there, that means that they lose any chance of using their Viserys, which seems awesome. I think that's a really good effect. However, right now, I don't think that there are many decks that you can really maximize Wall Lens so that it's worth running. I think that it could be a tech further on, and even the decks that you in theory want to use it on, like something like Morphrost, in reality, they really want to have their spirits in the underworld, so you don't really want to use that on it unless you have a way to stop it, which I don't believe that we have any way to stop adding those Morphrost back to the hand, and you would just be essentially giving the opponent, the Morphrost opponent, a 12 attack Morphrost or 11 attack. Like, that's really, really strong, and I don't think that right now Wall Lens, it's not the time for Wall Lens. I think that Wall Lens will see play further in the future, but I don't think anytime now. I don't think it's going to be a rogue deck. I don't think that it's going to be that good of a card right now. maybe in the future as a tech. So I think it's going to be a D. I think that in casual play it's going to be really strong, being able to run over your opponents and probably not going to have as many counter runes or as strong as counter runes to be able to stop wall-ins, and that's going to be devastating. But in more competitive sceneries, I don't think that it's going to be as effective as the card implies by its effect. So, and moving on to the last water card for today's video, we have Babloon. Babloon is a 1-cost water that has 1 attack and 2 defense. And if we just judge this card based on its stats, it's horrendous. It's horrible. It deserves an F. So let's see what its effect has. So that way, if we see if it deserves an F, it says that water enchanted Elestrals get +2 attack and +2 defense. And now this makes this card a little bit more viable. It makes it so that Babloon essentially has 3 attack and 4 defense, which is a lot more respectable. But if you're able to stack a lot of Babloons, then suddenly this 3 cost becomes this 3 attack becomes 5 attack and 6 defense. So you can have them as a wall that later on can become an offensive presence. And this is not limited to Babloons. You're able to add stats to your other water enchanted. So that means that something like a Galaxy now suddenly has 7 attack. And something like a Ampharos in theory now has 4 attack and 6 defense. So again, we do see that there is a lot of potential with this card, but I don't know if this is quite the format for Babloon just yet. I do think that it can see play. I think it could be its own rogue deck, but I don't think that it's going to be like a super meta card. So I think that for this final card, we're going to have to limit it to a C. I think that I can't give it any higher than this. I think in the future it could be better, but for now, the best rating I could give it is a C.
And now to end the video, I'm going to give you guys a summary of all the ratings. This was recommended by a viewer of the channel, and I took it to heart, and I thought that was a great idea. So let's go to the review. We have, in S tier, we have Lavalith. In A tier, we have Exalter. In B tier, we have Kamagma. In C, we have Caperfume, I think it was. And in D tier, we have Smoky. Now let's move on to the water portion of the video. In Frostfall, the S tier category for water is none other than Harpoon. In A tier, we have Dotagwa. In B tier, we have Locagon. In C tier, we have Cerebral. And then we also have Babloon. In D tier, we have Wallens. And in F tier, we have Cerebrum. Feel free to pause the video and take screenshots if you like. Now let's move on to the final part of this video.
So, what do you guys think about that? From the get-go, I have to say that there are a lot of very exciting new cards being revealed in this set, particularly for Water and Fire, which are my personal favorite archetypes to use, or elements to use. We have a little bit of everything. We have some S tier cards such as Lavalith and Harpoon. We also have some not so good cards, some more middle of the pack cards. But in general, we can definitely say that the creator of this game really was thinking on how we can make it so that Water and Fire are a little bit more viable. So the question for you is, do you think that we're going to see more Fire and Water decks in the meta? Or do you think that we still don't have enough and that we're going to need a little bit more help in the future to make it so that Water and Fire decks are that prevalent? Please write your comment down below. That is going to be the question of the day. I love to interact with your comments, and I really appreciate it. It goes a long way in this channel. It really does. So I hope that you guys comment down below what you guys think. Do you think Fire or Water are going to be more prevalent in the meta? Moving aside from that, I implore you guys to please like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe. Please, if you haven't already, please subscribe. We're trying to hit that first milestone of 50 subscribers, and we're kind of like halfway to that 50 mark. We have 24 subscribers currently, so hopefully with this video and more videos coming up, we can reach that first landmark, that first milestone of 50 subscribers. Well, I'm not gonna keep you guys waiting. That will be all for today's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and don't forget, there's a lot of more content on the way, so please don't miss out on it. All right, so Decentshirt signing out.